All right, I think we're going to get started here. We have a packed agenda for you all. So hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Jessica Kaplan, and I'm the horticulture manager here at the Conservancy. And we are so excited for our last program in our horticulture Zoom series. And tonight we will be covering the slow flowers movement with Debra Prinzing and Janet Kramka. So this spring and summer, the horticulture exhibition at Madison Square Park, Spring Forward into Summer, highlights the cut flower industry. This exhibition explores the utilitarian art, cyclical themes, and cultural significance of the cutting garden. And if you haven't stopped by, I've said this already, but now is the time. Our free cut flower stand is stocked every morning for you to take a flower with you on your day, so please stop by. So tonight we will hear from Debra Prinzing on what the slow flowers movement is and why it is so important to the cut flower industry. And then after that, we'll dive into a panel with Debra and Janet of Backyard Blooms to discuss how the slow flowers movement principles work into a cut flower business. And I would just like to encourage you to head to our website after and watch our previous horticulture Zoom sessions. There's 3 on there. They were all fabulous. So please watch them if you haven't. I would now like to introduce our 2 speakers for the night. Debra Prinzing is an award-winning author, speaker, and leading advocate for American-grown flowers. She is the creator of slowflowers.com, a free online directory that helps consumers find florists, designers, and studios and farms that supply American-grown flowers. Debra's book, Slow Flowers, received a silver medal from Garden Writers Association in 2014. Debra is also the producer and host of the Slow Flowers podcast with Debra Prinzing, which is available for free download on iTunes or at debraprinzing.com. And Janet, when Janet was 3 months old, her favorite toy was a bag of Wonder Bread, not because it was soft and squishy, but because she was mesmerized by the yellow, red, and blue dots all over the bag. Her passion for color and design soon developed beyond bread packaging and grew to include a love for nature and creating beauty in whatever space she could. As the sole proprietor of Backyard Blooms Flower Farm, Janet and her husband Peter work to nurture soil, seed, and stem in the 2,500 square foot space of their suburban backyard in Connecticut. They have embraced the slow flowers movement in the 3 years they have been farming, growing flowers sustainably and in rhythm with the seasons out of respect for people and the earth. Their philosophy is that beauty should be deep. It should go beyond the superficial loveliness of the blooms and extend into the soil and the surrounding area to benefit all those that inhabit that space. So just one housekeeping before we dive right in. Please put your questions for Debra and Janet in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Debra to get us started. Just give her a couple of moments to get her slides up.
Thanks so much, Jessica and Ayana. It's so good to be with you guys and be with everybody here. And I'm going to share my screen. And apologies, I have a little bit of a sore throat, so I was sucking on a lozenge there for a minute. Full screen mode. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to try to go a little quickly through about 25, 30 minutes of slides today, kind of a mini presentation. And I just thank you all for being here. And I just wish that I was able to go pick up my bloom at Madison Square Park. That's a really cool program. We like to encourage everyone to enjoy cut flowers, whether they're professionals or avid enthusiasts and gardeners, which is what I came to this idea of slow flowers as a home gardener and a garden writer. So I'm going to talk to you about how this all came together and what the hallmarks of slow flowers are. A lot of people are familiar with the concept of slow food. I think certainly people on both coasts are early adopters of that. And really, I have to pay honor to the slow food movement for adopting this phrase, slow flowers. And you see some of the features on the screen. I'll be talking about them, so I'm not going to read them to you. But I have to say, when I first started writing about flower farming and sustainable floral design, I was seeking a term, a shorthand way to explain what I was writing about to my friends and peers and other editors in the media. And I started saying it's like slow food, but let's call it slow flowers. And that really sort of captured and encapsulated everything that we are seeing in that anti-fast food movement. Now we're looking at anti-mass market flowers, sourcing close to home, honoring the farmer, honoring the earth, trying to live within the seasons, all those parallels, which I think gardeners really understand. This is our mission. We're really focused as an advocacy and education organization and a networking community for people like Janet and 850 other flower farmers and florists across the country. A lot of people want to know, is it mainstream? And we started tracking the hashtag slow flowers several years ago. This just shows a recent 365-day snapshot of the use of the hashtag slow flowers on basically just Twitter and Instagram. You can't, for some reason, can't track Facebook, and yet just on those two channels alone, over 67 million social media impressions were saw the use of slow flowers. It's really become a global term. But just to give everyone a snapshot of what's happening here in the US and why this is so important, in the last 25, 30 years, we've seen a real decline in our domestic cut flower industry, to the point where nearly 80% of cut flowers sold in the US are imported, mostly from South America. That is really changing, but it's changing kind of in an egalitarian way across the country on small farms like Backyard Blooms in all 50 states. One of the things I look at is what are the numbers and how can we track that? So the second bullet point talks about the USDA floriculture census that happens every 5 years. And I'm going to show you some numbers. So I'll dig into that in the next few slides. But in the last 2 5-year cycles, the number of farms that have reported growing some or all of their acreage in cut flowers has grown by 16%. So that's a real trackable figure. And the third bullet point I really love is that a study about 5 years ago that USDA did on small scale farming identified that floriculture is one of the top most profitable value-added crops for farmers, but more value add than livestock or edibles. So, sometimes people kind of have that attitude that, well, flowers aren't real farming because you're not feeding people, it's not food, it's not sustaining us. And I kind of like to point to this study to say, well, we're sustaining the flower farmer who's trying to make a living on their land. And if flowers are more profitable, that's good enough for me. Here's the census. I mentioned that this year, another census is taking place. It's every 5 years. And then the report will come out the following year. So we'll have some new numbers in 2023, but you can see this is between 2007 and 2012, the number of farms identified went from about 5,000 to almost 6,000. So that was about 16%. And then the following block of time from 2012 to 2017, it went from about 6,000 to 7,000. So, numbers don't lie. And it's nice to have something like that to point to when you're trying to, convince people that this is important. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about the continuum of flowers from the field to the vase. There's opportunities for people on every point along that continuum, and it's really exciting to witness, but it begins with the flower farmer. And I like to say the flower farmers are the new rock stars of the floral world, the way that the, artisan grower of some heirloom radish is like the rock star of the culinary world. This is the group of people who mostly influenced me at the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market in the Pacific Northwest. It's a legal cooperative started in 2011 by 15 farmers in Oregon and Washington who wanted to bring their flowers to the wholesale marketplace and were basically not being paid fairly by the conventional wholesalers. They felt like they weren't being taken seriously. They were always the last to be called when with a need. They were asked to sell on consignment. They weren't being paid a competitive wage for what we knew was high quality, beautiful flowers. And so they started Seattle Wholesale Growers Market in 2011, and now it has become a model for other regional flower hubs all around the country who emulate and desire to be this hub for the floral industry in a major market. So I'll talk a little bit more about that and what's happening in the New York metro market. But I thought I'd just introduce you to some flower farmers who are part of Slow Flowers who are in New York. This is a group that is loosely called the Hudson Valley Flower Growers. Right now, it's basically a Facebook group, which is HV Flower Growers. You can look it up, and you know, they don't post a lot, but if they have any kind of information, they'll share it there. This was a spontaneous American Flowers Week event that was held in Hudson Valley, and they sent me this photo. I think during COVID, this group met mostly via Zoom meetings and really became a source of encouragement and kind of sharing ideas and sharing strategies with each other. And I think that is one beautiful hallmark of the Slow Flowers movement, is that there's a lot of information sharing, networking, mentoring, and resource sharing as well. This couple are right on Long Island, Jacqueline Rutigliano and Mark Yervino, and they own Hometown Flower Company. They're in a town called Huntington on Long Island. And Jacqueline comes out of the flower industry. She's the third generation flower professional. Her parents and grandparents, though, were very conventional and had the mom and pop flower shop and the big wedding and event company out on Long Island. And Janet changed it up and said, Jacqueline rather said, I want to do only local flowers, and I want to change my business model. So they have this vintage Ford pickup truck, and it's got a cute awning on it. And Jacqueline and Mark take this to pop-ups around their community. They also rent it out for weddings and events. And they work with a handful of, at least a dozen flower farmers, mostly on Long Island, but also in Connecticut, to source their flowers. They are featured in my book, Where We Bloom. And if you want to find information on that, I'll put it in the chat. And this is a couple named Jennifer Couvent and Hans Lee. They're in LaGrangeville, which is closer to Hudson Valley. They're New York City escapees who, especially during COVID, decided that the farm that they owned was going to be their new life. And it was a now or never moment for them. They established 6 Duchess farms. It's a real lifestyle farm. They grow cut flowers. They grow berries and herbs. They keep livestock. They have Swedish Gotland sheep, which they are very involved in the kind of knitting and yarn and weaving industry by shearing those sheep and selling the yarn to makers. And then they keep chickens and bees. But they've been able to create a lifestyle both for themselves on their farm and also virtually through a very large group of students who take their workshops. And the workshops include cooking as well as knitting, as well as things about growing flowers. This doesn't really show the flower farmer's face, but this is Jenny Ray Ciplo of Flower Well, which is in Western New York, up in the Rochester area. She's definitely in the farmer florist category, and I'm going to talk more about that as well. She has a very robust growing business, but also a wedding design business. And you can see those gorgeous dahlias and how beautiful they are, exactly what florists are looking for. And some flower farmers are ranging out into retail. This is a retail shop in Copake, New York, also kind of in Hudson Valley, owned by Jenny Elliott and Luke Franco, and it's called Tiny Hearts Flower Farm. They're excellent growers, and they also have a retail store where they basically sell to themselves. And that's when you're talking about sustainable models, that's really beneficial. And they've been featured in Martha Stewart Living, so they get a lot of destination flower fans. But I mentioned the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market being an influence of other regional flower hubs. And just in the New York area alone, there are 3 strong groups that have emerged in the last 4 or 5 years. the Connecticut Flower Collective, I know Janet is involved in, is one of the growers, so she'll probably talk about that a little bit later. The Garden State Flower Co-op started about 3 years ago in northern New Jersey, and then the Jersey Cut Flower Market just started this year in southern New Jersey. But in all of these, whether they're a legal cooperative or more of a co-marketing collective, the idea is to create a central location where flower farmers can bring their cut flowers to on a weekly basis or maybe twice a week to a center where then florists can come and pick up their orders that they might have pre-ordered or even shop in person. We're seeing this model take place all across the country. There's several in the DC, Virginia area. There's a group in Montana doing this. There are groups in the Bay Area, in Los Angeles, and also in Twin Cities. So we're seeing this sense that, back to the story of the Seattle Wholesale Growers Market, 12 years ago, people are being empowered to come together and realize that the shared marketing costs under, coming together to either form a collective or a cooperative is a really beneficial way for flower farmers to not be driving their vans or trucks around all day long delivering to florists, but to have kind of a one-stop hub. So we'll answer some questions about that, and maybe Janet and I can talk a little bit about that more in the discussion. The other channels are equally important, and we're seeing a lot of change. A lot of this change did, to be honest, happen because of COVID and the supply chain threat of conventional flower model of imported flowers got disrupted. And all of a sudden in 2020 and 2021, a lot of florists lost their traditional way of getting flowers. And so they started looking for local flowers. There are wholesalers that are resisting this, and then there are wholesalers who are totally on board. Mayesh they're based in Los Angeles, but they have about 20 branches across the US. Probably the closest one to the New York market is in I think Cleveland, but they do ship. But they are basically working directly with as many local flower farmers as possible. But it takes a lot more work, because sometimes a flower farmer might only have a dozen buckets of something versus, a big cargo jet coming in from Ecuador or Holland. So it takes the desire to meet the demands of customers, florists who are asking for local flowers. So we work a lot with Mayesh. Grocery stores run the gamut. This is a Central Market is a small family-owned chain in my market in Seattle that is so committed to working with local flower farmers, and they they'll do things like create special promotions around certain crops when there's an overproduction. For example, maybe there's just way more dahlias in a month than a certain farmer had planned for. And then Central Market will create a special, like maybe 3-stem bunch or 5-stem bunch. Obviously, the price is got to be appealing to the customer, and the farmer might be willing to take a little bit less because they're moving a lot of volume. And so the grocery stores that get it are really doing well, because over 50% of flowers purchased in the US are purchased at the grocery store level. So it's sort of a depressing number, but also an opportunity. I think a lot of Slow Flowers members work with Whole Foods. It's not for everyone. It's a lot of paperwork. I've heard that it's supposedly better now that Amazon has bought Whole Foods, but I have no first-person experience about that. These are flowers sold in the Boulder, Denver marketplace by Slow Flowers members who have a big greenhouse operation called the Fresh Herb Company, and their flowers are they deliver to a distribution center, and then Whole Foods takes the flowers to like a dozen stores throughout the Rocky Mountain region. There's also e-commerce, and direct-to-consumer really exploded during COVID because people wanted contact-free flower deliveries. And so we did a series on our members who are doing innovative e-commerce. This is a member who is a florist who kept trying to buy direct from flower farmers to the point where she had so many good relationships. She started The Floral Source, which is her sourcing website for other florists to buy curated boxes of flowers, mostly from California farms. But when the peonies are in season in Alaska, this florist's name is Kelly Shore. She's from the DC market. She'll work with the peony growers there. She's also working with the fern growers from Florida, and does these sort of curated boxes on a mostly on a weekly basis. Postal Petals is a really interesting Black-owned flower enterprise out of Los Angeles. And Talia Boone started it during COVID. She's a corporate marketing executive, and she wanted to buy flowers sort of for her mental health and her floral therapy. And she found someone who is a flower broker in California to partner with. They only buy from California farms, and they've created these DIY boxes that is now become part of this business, Postal Petals, where you can go online, you can order a box of flowers, and then Talia often hosts DIY workshops for people around the country who bought these boxes of flowers. They're not arranged bouquets. They're loose, small bunches of different varieties. And then people either can have their own fun parties or take these online courses to know what to do with the flowers. So she's done really well as a business that emerged out of COVID. One of the most well-known e-commerce flower companies who we work closely with is Farm Grow Flowers. Farm Grow Flowers is in its, I think, 11th year. They're based in the Bay Area. They started with a bicycle messenger service and burlap wrap bouquets just in the San Francisco Bay Area, but they've expanded now all across the US with overnight flowers. And now that they're so big, they do have a mix of imported and domestic. I, of course, only want to support the domestic flowers, so I like going onto their website and seeing this US grown logo that tells me that I'm supporting a US flower farm when I buy those. And then we also see flower farmers creating their own consumer facing sites. So they often change the branding. Like this is a Stargazer Barn is actually owned by the largest cut flower company in the US. It's in Arcata, California. They're called the Sun Valley Growers. They basically supply Pro Flowers and all the grocery store chains, Safeway, Albertsons, Kroger, but they saw an opportunity to have a separate brand that just marketed to consumers, and they call it Stargazer Barn. And they have a wine business too. So this particular website has a wine and flowers emphasis. Smaller growers are doing it too. Rose Story Farm is one of the earliest growers of organic garden roses as opposed to long stem florist roses that are really in demand by wedding and event florists. And Rose Story also started selling to consumers during COVID. The Protea store is owned by the largest Protea grower in San Diego, Resendez Brothers, and they normally don't sell to the public. And so they started this website to just sell Protea wreaths and bouquets, as individual gifts for the consumers because the demand was so high. So those are some of the channels that people are selling through. I want to talk a little bit about, okay, we've got 10 minutes to go. I'm going to speed it up, talk about some of the retail and studio florists and what they're doing. These are, retail is not dead. It's really exciting to see that retail is thriving when there's a community kind of emphasis and florists and flower farmers come together to serve their community. So you'll either have Flowers and Weeds, which is in St. Louis, they've combined a flower shop with a garden center. The London Plain, which is in Seattle, has combined a flower shop with a bakery and restaurant. Stems Brooklyn is right in your backyard, and it is owned by Susanna Cameron. She opened Stems about 8 or 9 years ago in the foyer of a tavern in, I believe it's in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood of Brooklyn. A lot of fun to go there, have a drink and buy flowers. There's another florist that we've worked with closely in Seattle, Melissa Fevier, who owns Terabella Flowers, and she's a sustainable florist. She actually started with a very unique niche serving customers who had chemical sensitivities, who only wanted organic flowers. And then that has expanded into serving restaurants. And also now she's got a wine license, and you can do wine tastings and go in and have a snip. What is it? She calls it sip and snip. You can do a wine tasting and make your flower arrangement. Farmer florists, I mentioned a little bit earlier, they're the people who are really, I think they're true artists. A lot of people don't think of flower farmers as artists, but we know what they're growing is a beautiful art supply. Asha Lurie owns Patagonia Flower Farm, and she's in Arizona. And she is growing flowers that people in Arizona outside of Tucson have never seen. Lisianthus. They've never seen local tulips. They're just mesmerized with what she's growing. And so Asha sells her designs at farmers markets and also through subscriptions. And she partners a lot with local businesses. So she'll do a pop-up at a restaurant on Saturday night, and she'll promote it through social media, and people will know that that's where they can find her flowers. Those are her Lisianthus. Eleanor Blackford is here in Seattle. She's a wedding and event florist. She turned her driveway into a cutting garden. So she's able to save on her wedding quotes by selling to herself, basically. So whatever she can, she'll grow. You see here, she's got dahlias, cosmos, phlox. She also, of course, has chickens, which is like an urban thing to do in lots of markets. But when the weekends that she doesn't have weddings, she will promote on social media flowers that she has available and sell to her friends who are florists. And then Heidi Joint and Molly Colbelt are in the Chicago area, and they run two businesses. They have a full-on retail flower shop and wedding studio in downtown Chicago called Field and Florist. And then they own their own cut flower farm in Michigan, about 90 minutes away. So they are growing during the week, bringing their flowers into the city and using them for their own designs or selling them to other florists. Let me just wrap up by talking a little bit about the book I wrote, Slow Flowers. As I said, I kind of came upon this phrase as a way to describe this fascination I had of living in the seasons and growing my own flowers in my garden and designing with them. But I learned that there's so many definitions of what is local, seasonal, and sustainable. So I'll just close by defining these, and we can talk a little bit more about this in the chat. I tried to find a definition for what is local, what determines local, and the only like government terms I could find were for food. And so this is a house rule about local food, that you can say something is local if it's grown within 400 miles of where it's sold or in the state in which it was sold. So that is fine for somebody like a small state, but in a big state like California, local means something a lot different than, say, a state like Delaware. But I think, we all have to define our own definition of local. I think people in cold markets increasingly are having to create innovative ways to extend the season, grow under cover, or possibly buy flowers that are from California. If you're a wedding and event designer and you need flowers, you want to support domestic. It's a way to augment what you're getting locally during the peak season. Then sustainability is also a term that's moves it's very fluid, but I like to point to this United Nations definition of sustainability and then take it from there and say, how can we think about the future in our own actions in our growing practices? So flower farmers' growing practices are very similar, I think, to many gardeners. Maybe we're not having solar panels in our gardens, but we're using organic fertilizer, natural pest and disease control. We're recycling water. We might be planting cover crops and trying to just minimize our use of anything that will be harmful for the earth. So I'm going to stop here and just thank you all so much for joining me. And then we'll keep the conversation going. I've really enjoyed sharing a little bit about what I'm doing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deborah. I know you had to kind of rush through that.
It's
So
okay.
we're gonna jump right in here And we want to hear from you, Janet. Give us a little bit about your background, about your backyard blooms business. Just give us, who you are and what you do.
It's really an honor to be here. So I just want to start with thanking you and the rest of the team and Debra for the opportunity. We've been a business for about 3 years now. So we are relatively new. We're considered beginner farmers, anyone who has less than 5 years experience. And we do farm, as you mentioned in the intro, in our suburban backyard on about 2,500 square feet, which I thought up until a few days ago was about 1/8 of an acre. But I did a little research, and actually 1/8 of an acre is 5,000 square feet. So we're not even that big.
Wow.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. Our growing zone is 6B. We're located in Connecticut, but we are within about an hour's drive of New York City. So we are considered a commuter town. We have a lot of Trumbull residents who commute to the city every day. So we have about 14 rows of flowers in our yard. They're 25 feet long and 4 feet wide. We started with only 4 rows. I thank my husband for this almost every day. I am the type of person who wants to just dive in big, and he said, let's just start with a few rows, make sure we can grow things and not kill them, see how it goes trying to market it, and then expand from there. And those were very wise words. I'm glad that he suggested that. So we started with only 4 rows in our backyard, and then we added another 4 with the next year and another 4 after that, and then a couple more. And we've about maxed out our space now. So we are currently looking for land because we have maximized the space that we're in. And I'm just enjoying this whole process so much that I still have this desire to go a little bigger. But you work with what you have, and it's been a very good platform for learning about farming as we go. I own the business. My husband assists as much as he possibly can. We often joke that he's the brawn and I'm the brains. It's not really quite that way. I do as much physical work as I can, and he has a lot of wonderful ideas that we incorporate, but I really couldn't do this without his assistance. So I'm very grateful for that. Our journey to farming was rather serendipitous. I have always had a love of nature, a love of color, as you said in the introduction. It really is a true story. I was infatuated with color from 3 months old forward. I have always loved art and beauty, and so flowers were always in the background because it's art in nature. So it's the perfect pairing of everything that I've gravitated towards. But it was only in the last few years that they jumped into the foreground of my life. I was a graphic designer for many years before leaping into this. The way it started was my daughter asked if I would help with bouquets for an event. And I had no experience doing bouquets for anyone. She just knew that I loved having them around the house all the time, was always getting flowers from the grocery store. As Debra mentioned, it's a big source of flowers for many people who are buying retail. And so that was the extent of it. I really just bought flowers and put them in vases around the house. And so I said yes to her reluctantly. I did it because it's my daughter and I love her, but I was really scared to death about doing this. And so a few weeks after saying yes to her, I was in a gift shop and I saw this book that caught my eye. The little bit of art that I really had done before graphic design was photography. And so I saw this book and it had beautiful photography. It just caught my eye. It was the Cut Flower Garden by Aaron Benzakein, of all things for me to glance at. So I pick it up and I'm looking at the illustrations in the book. And I see a few pictures of bouquets. I put the book aside because I was there for another purpose. I was trying to stay focused. But I got home and I kept thinking about that book over and over again. And I thought, I'm I'm going to go back and get that. I think that might give me some advice for making bouquets. And so that'll help me not feel so tense about this project that I said I would help with. So I get the book, and when I got home and started reading it, I realized it wasn't about making bouquets. It was about flower farming. I had no idea from the little bit that I looked at it in the store. And so I showed it to my husband, and we were laughing about it. Oh, it's not even about bouquets. It's about flower farming. I put it aside. But again, this book just kept drawing me in. It was just one of those things. So I started reading it voraciously, read through the whole book in about a week. And at the end of it, I closed the last page and I look at him and I said, I think I want to become a flower farmer. And he was just like, what? So that's really how it was born. But as I said, it was really the culmination of things that had already been in my toolbox, but I'd never really put them all together before. So that was the start of the journey. We had a lot of discussions about it, which was very important because, again, I knew I would need his help with this, and that he works full-time in IT. He has a very demanding job. I was still doing my graphic design job on the side. So I knew that I was going to need some assistance with this. And I'm glad we talked it through. It is, I've often said, one of the hardest things we've ever done, but definitely one of the most rewarding things we've ever done. My really humble apologies to farmers everywhere, because at first I thought, you put some seeds in the ground, how hard can it be? That was, there's quite a learning curve there, and I was humbled right away. It really is just it takes a lot of grit, a lot of perseverance, a lot of hard work. Fortunately, my husband isn't the kind of person who likes to play golf and go boating on the weekends. They're wonderful pursuits, but he's more of a nature, like just go out and go for a hike kind of person. And I'm thankful for that, because he would never get to do those things if that was his, if those were his pastimes of choice. Because every weekend we are in that backyard. That's our commitment. That's where we are. I'm there all day. He comes and joins me at night, and then we're there all weekend. So it is a lot of work, but we love it. So that's the story of how we got involved in that.
Love that. And that book will absolutely make anyone want to be a flower farmer. Just the images alone draw you in. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about how you found the slow flowers movement and how you kind of incorporated that into your business.
Yeah, I think, I don't know exactly where I encountered slow flowers. I believe it was through I heard about the Connecticut Flower Collective in my first year of growing, and they adhere to the principles of the slow flowers movement. So when I applied to be a grower as part of the Connecticut Flower Collective, I believe that's where the first connection came. And I thought, oh, what is slow flowers? Now, we were already practicing that, but I didn't know that we were practicing that. So I did some research, became a member, and just really ate it up. I mean, the slow flowers movement represents everything that I was already processing and thinking through. It gave substance to ideas that were floating in my head, and it was just an invaluable resource for us.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Debra, can we kind of talk a little bit about, collectives? Janet, you're part of the Connecticut Flower Collective. There's ones in everywhere. But can you kind of talk a little bit about it across the US and maybe even globally? Has this kind of taken off beyond just a few states? Oh, did we? Oh, okay. Janet, can you hear?
I can hear you. It's
me
a little
okay?
choppy.
Oh, okay. So maybe we'll just move on here. If you can hear this question, can you kind of talk a little bit about how you sell your flowers and make a living?
Yes. We are, as I said, I am kind of a one-man show with a lot of help from my husband. But so I recognize I am really, I'll say this up front, I am spreading myself too thin with the number of markets that I'm in. However, I did this with a lot of forethought. As a new farmer, I wanted to have a taste of many different markets with the goal of narrowing that down as we go to determine which markets really work best for us. So it is, in my opinion, too many markets to handle for one person. But I mean, we're making it work, obviously, but I do want to narrow this as we go. So I'm currently selling wholesale through the Connecticut Flower Collective. I'm doing retail through a very cute little gift shop in Trumbull called Pure Poetry. I sell to the Trumbull Farmers Market every Thursday. I have CSA subscriptions, so we have flower subscriptions that we market. And one of my favorite outlets that I know that I will hang on to is DIY Buckets of Blooms. So anyone who has, you know, an event and they want to do their own flowers, they come and get buckets of flowers from me. I get really invested in their events. I love the email exchange, and they're telling me what the events are for, and I just want the events to be so wonderful for them. So I'm really an extrovert, and there's so much people connection in those. So I get excited about doing the Buckets of Blooms. And I am a farmer florist. So I also make bouquets on demand. People send emails or text me with requests. So that's 6 different markets that I'm involved in.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said, it's a great learning experience, and to see, you know, where you really fit into the scheme. But Deborah, I see you're back. Can you hear me?
I can, and somehow I got frozen out, so I apologize. I'm back.
Okay, no problem. So I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about the slow flowers movement across the US and maybe even globally. How is this really taking off, and where do you see it going?
You know, thank you for asking. I mean, I think Janet's personal story is so inspiring, because there are thousands of people who have very similar stories. Mainly I'm focused on the US and Canada, but I hear from people all around the world who have discovered a passion for growing flowers, and the fact that they can actually support themselves or create a way to monetize their flowers. And I think a lot of it has to do with consumer attitudes. I think there's been this big shift in the last decade, especially, of people asking what is the origin of everything that they're purchasing. We see it in slow fashion. We see it in the home furnishings industry, in automotive, and in art, obviously in food. And so that's benefited. I think the whole maker movement has exploded, and that whole idea of wanting to return to the home crafts, the handmade, and the growing heirloom flowers and specialty cut flowers fits right into that. And so the consumer is willing to adopt that. I was just going to pop up one image on the screen that we have been surveying for the last 2 years, consumers, as part of the National Garden Survey, and asking them a question about, you know, where they source their flowers. And it's been really encouraging that we've had this, I don't know if you guys can see this, but we've asked people, how important is it to you to the flowers you purchase are locally grown? And this number 65% was from the study that was released in April, and that was up from 58% the previous year. I know it's only one study, but it's really encouraging, because something's happening to cause people to even think about the origin of their flowers. And it's when they can read a story about someone in their backyard who's growing flowers, or meet a flower farmer at the farmer's market, or buy from a florist who's bought her flowers from Janet, and talking, learning that, oh, wow, these were just grown in Trumbull, Connecticut. And They were cut yesterday and now they're in your vase today. Like all of those things add this benefit. So it's really the time for local flowers. And I think those of us who've been doing this for 15 years, I felt a little lonely, and now it's just you don't have to explain it to people anymore. It's just really nice.
I have really found that to be true at the farmers market. Exactly what Debra's saying. People come to the booth and they say, "You grow these here in Trumbull?" And they're so excited to hear that. There's also some retraining because I think people are starting to adjust to this new model. And so sometimes at the booth, they'll say, "Now, if I buy these today, my market's on a Thursday, keep in mind, will they still be good on Sunday?" And I'm thinking to myself, if these aren't still good on Sunday, I'm in the wrong career field. But for them, they're used to something that doesn't have the same longevity because it's already been imported or it's been sitting in a bucket in the supermarket for days. And so they get it home and they're not accustomed to that. So when I say, no, these will last about a week, they're always pleasantly surprised by that. But it is also really fun, I think, for people, as Debra said, to make these personal connections, like I'm the grower, and that means something to them that they have met the grower. I know that's important at the Connecticut Flower Collective, for example. Some of the buyers there, the floral designers, they have said that one thing they love is, they can get flowers elsewhere, but they love that they can come to the collective and the growers are often there and they're putting a face to the person who's grown the flowers, and they can ask questions like, if I buy these cosmos on Wednesday, are they going to be, still in good shape on Sunday, that sort of thing, because cosmos don't tend to last a long time. But they love that personal touch. And I think that people are hungry for connections.
Yeah.
So the slow flowers movement is wonderful for that.
I do think that mentioning the collective and the reason this has been so successful in Connecticut and also New Jersey is the florists who are buying from these collectives, previously had to drive all the way into West 28th Street in Manhattan and navigate that myriad of craziness where there's some really great wholesalers and they have really great product. But just from a business point of view, it's so nice to have something closer to your studio or to your event. And I know a lot of weddings and events take place at destinations by the shore or at wineries or whatever. And so I think that I'm seeing that happen a lot also in areas where the cost of doing business in a major metropolitan hub like, say, San Francisco is making it not appealing for florists to get up at 2 a.m. and drive into San Francisco to buy flowers. And when, guess what? They can go buy from a hub in Oakland, or they can buy from a hub in Sonoma wine country. And that's closer to where the wedding or event is anyway. So it's sort of, the farmers have done a lot of legwork to make this hard for florists to refuse. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's just because we have more entrepreneurial people like Janet, who have maybe come out of another business field and adopted flower farming as a second career, or, a change, just a lifestyle change. They're thinking about, the fact that I can't just grow them and wait for people to come to me. I've got to market my flowers.
Yeah. One thing that was so revealing to me in my first year growing, I called a local floral designer and said, "Hi, I'm a new local grower. Can we talk about what your needs might be and if you'd be interested in purchasing local flowers?" They were wonderful, very accommodating, sat down with me. And one of the first questions they said is, so you grow peonies, if I need 100 of them for a wedding, can you supply 100? And I just thought, oh, yeah, no, I can't do that. I realized very quickly, I don't have the kind of volume that a floral designer often needs for a wedding. But that is the beauty of a collective, right? When I found the Flower Collective, that was the answer to that for buyers who want to grow locally, because we are, I don't know how many farms actually are involved in our collective. I should have done the homework on that. But, if I have 10 bunches of Lysianthus and someone else has 20 and someone else has 50, together we can meet those needs.
Yeah,
So
that's a really good point.
yeah, we are as strong as a whole as each individual farmer contributes, which makes it a very cooperative group because we're always helping each other, giving each other growing tips. I'll walk in there and see something that isn't maybe as tall as someone else's blooms, and it's never a critical thing. It's inspiration for, oh, I can do better with this because I can see, someone else's flowers and that they have been able to get more height in their blooms. And so we'll talk about that. What did you do? So we're always helping each other because we want to be successful as a whole. So it's allowed a small, literally starting in my backyard business to become a successful business because of these connections. So that's been wonderful. Yeah. A few other things that I could say about the slow flowers movement that has really helped me as a grower is that I appreciate more. It has forced more creativity because we're dealing with what's in season, right? So if someone comes to me and they want something in June, which has typically been, I don't have a lot in bloom in June. I have a lot of tulips and narcissus in April and May. Most of my annuals don't come on until July. I've been learning and practicing overwintering techniques that have been producing some blooms in June, but it's not my peak season. So it forces me to look at the area around me and say, what can I do with what I have? So it really fosters creativity. And in fact, things like I came in the house one day last year with a bunch of pokeweed, which grows invasively really in the woods right next to my house. And I brought it in and my husband said, are you going to use that in bouquets? Isn't that a weed? And I said to him, well, define weed, which actually begged a good question. I actually did Google research on it. What is the difference between a flower and a weed? And the answer was really astounding to me. It's just a matter of perception. A weed is just a plant that grows in an area where it's undesirable. Someone doesn't want it to grow where it's growing. But other than that, there really isn't any distinction between a flower and a weed. It is purely a matter of perception. And so I have learned to look at things that really thrive locally, like goldenrod, for example, allergies aside, and things like pokeweed, and incorporated things like that into bouquets because I'm trying to work with what I have that's seasonally available. So I've really appreciated that about the slow flowers movement.
That's a really good point, Janet. I have to say, I was interviewing somebody the other day about a florist, and I said, what is your aesthetic? Like, how do you just define your design style? And, she kind of tossed around some ideas like modern farmhouse and, wild and whimsical, but we kind of concluded together that, that her aesthetic is seasonality, and that if you're really committed to the slow flowers values, then you are going to work with what's in season. And that should be the most beautiful thing available. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot. And I don't know if you get into this, Janet, with your own subscriptions, but we're seeing a lot of this grower's choice or designer's choice descriptions on bouquets that are, sold by people who are saying to their customers, tell me your palette, I can meet your palette, but I can't guarantee what's going to be in it because I'm going to respond to what the farmers have available this week. Or the farmer says, I'm going to respond to what I'm cutting this week. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing I wanted to say about the slow flowers movement is the way that it's really contributed to a principle that we've had related to beauty that runs deep. What I appreciate is that if you're farming by slow flowers principles, then you are being deliberate about the choices that you're making in your farming practices. So anyone can grow a flower and make it and grow something beautiful. But a beauty that runs deep is beauty that is stewarding the land. It's creating space for pollinators, making pollinators happy. It is a legacy that we're leaving to the next generation. And that's part of our value system. And the Slow Flowers movement has really helped us encapsulate that.
All righty. Thank you so much for that lively discussion. Both shared so much, Debra and Janet. So I just want to thank you. And thanks, Jess, for being such a great host tonight and throughout the course of this webinar series. We only have a few minutes left, so we're going to get straight to the questions. We have one. Janet, you spoke about the learning curve for starting your backyard farm. Is there any one specific lesson that was a game changer for you?
There's been so many lessons, it's hard to pinpoint, but one thing that encouraged me greatly was something that I heard another farmer say. I don't remember who it was. I listened to so many podcasts educationally, and I don't remember what my source was, but I heard someone say that they had talked to a seasoned farmer who had been doing this, farming most of their lives, and that farmer had said that he considers it a 5-year cycle before he feels that he really knows something about a plant. And so the person that I was listening to on the podcast said that was encouraging to her, and it's very encouraging to me as well, to know that even someone who has years and years of experience says that it can take up to 5 years to really feel like you're understanding a single crop. And of course, as a cut flower grower, I'm growing hundreds of different types of flowers, different varieties. For example, in my first year of farming, I chose what are easy beginner flowers, one of them being zinnias. And they grew easily. We start our flowers from seed. They grew from seed, no problem. We planted them. We had a beautiful crop of zinnias. But I in no way have mastered the zinnia. In 1 year of growing, I realized that even though I had a beautiful flower, we had a huge storm that came through, and the netting that I had up toppled everything. It wasn't strong enough to support it. So now I've learned something about how to support my flowers. Later in the season, there was some powdery mildew, which is often afflicting zinnias. It's a common problem with them. And so now I have to figure out, how do I deal with powdery mildew? You're learning how to deal with insect invasion. So there's so many different levels of farming. It's not just that I made something grow and it looks nice. It's a whole cycle. And I think he probably said 5 years, because probably in a 5-year span, you've encountered all types of weather conditions, drought, torrential rain, heavy winds, etc., bugs, infestations, whatever it might be. And it takes time. So that was very encouraging to me. That's a lesson I'm still learning in the practice.
Yes, and I'm just going to second a comment that was submitted in the chat as well, that goldenrod gets a bad reputation for causing seasonal allergies, but it actually doesn't. It blooms around the same time as ragweed, so it's that ragweed pollen that's really irritating folks who experience allergy.
Interesting. Okay. I won't feel bad about incorporating it in my bouquets then.
I actually have it in my cutting garden. I put it in the ground intentionally because it's hard to get some, late summer, beautiful late summer texture. And that's just seems to fit the bill.
Yeah.
Definitely wonderful for seasonal interest, that goldenrod into aster, that transitional time period.
Yes. Love that. I can picture that.
So we're at 7 o'clock. Any last minute questions, feel free to submit them. We will forward them along to Debra and Janet. Thank you so much for that discussion. Thank you for closing us out on such a wonderful high note. So thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you all. It was really fun.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hopefully
Take care.
on sometime.
Have fun growing flowers.
Yes, you do.